topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program again. Thanks for tuning back in. Great to have you again. This show has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015 already. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. And if we've not met before, I am an organizational psychologist and logotherapist. I'm a speaker and an author, and my team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations and increase profitability by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose. Our mission is to help the companies we serve create a destination workplace where people flock to join, are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow into their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission, which translates to those higher profits. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. Getting into today's program, we have with us today Dr. Joey Faucette, who transforms companies from a negative Kevin culture to a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. He is the culture architect of the Work Positive Framework, certified executive coach, and best-selling author of Work Positive in a Negative World, Team Edition. His work has appeared on Wall Street Journal, Money Watch, CNBC, Fox Business News, Entrepreneur Media, and countless other sites. He hosts the Work Positive podcast, which I've been on, I'm happy to say. He joins us today from Danville, Virginia. Dr. Joey A. Hardy, welcome to Working on Purpose.
I am delighted to work on purpose with you, Elise. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to talk to a like soul, Dr. Joy. I really appreciate who you're being in the world, and we have a lot of work to do, and this beautiful book that you created is a wonderful contribution to that. Thank you for that. And it's just chock full of all kinds of resources and QR codes to take you to assessments and instruction and guides. So really well done, Dr. Joy. Thank you.
That means a lot coming from you because, I'm a big fan of yours and love your book and had you on the Work Positive podcast. So it means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, so I love stories, as I know you do too. And I think we both agree that really good leaders tend to be good storytellers.
Absolutely.
So we have to start this podcast, your conversation about you, sharing this wonderful story that you share in your book about 9-year-old Dr. Joy and the boy that really set himself off on this journey that he's on today. Tell us that story, if you would.
Well, that cute little 9-year-old kid had a lot more hair than I have today, at least. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, primarily in agribusiness. My mother's parents were formative in my early life. My grandfather and grandmother ran a country store, raised tobacco, milked about 80 dairy cows twice a day, raised corn for them and all like that. So I just thought everybody woke up when the sun did and ate 3 big meals a day because you were working hard, and then fell into bed after dark and got up and did it all over again the next day. But there was a purpose to it all, and family was very important. So here I am, a 9-year-old little boy, and I decide that it's time for me to make my way in the world. So I did what most 9-year-old little boys do. I borrowed a lawnmower. I don't even remember whose it was. My dad had our lawn mown, but I borrowed the neighbor's lawnmower and started mowing lawns. I got about halfway through with the front yard of somebody's lawn, Elise, and started sneezing and coughing and sneezing. And I had asthma, and I had taken allergy shots since I was a 2-year-old, back when they first invented allergy shots, right? And so I got to coughing and sneezing so much that I could no longer finish. Became sick after that. They discovered I had a viral infection in my lungs. My asthma was triggered by that. Wound up at Duke University's Medical Center with, as it turns out, one of the foremost pediatric asthma allergists in the world. So talk about being in the right place at the right time, right? But one particular night, I remember I was coughing incessantly, literally couldn't catch my breath. My mother slept on the floor beside my bed, literally, because my complexion was greenish blue, and it was just a pivotal moment, shall we say. I get emotional even now just thinking about it, but it was one of those make or break times. In other words, if Joey makes it through the night, then we stand a chance. That's what the internist told Mom. So I remember Mom on her knees beside my bed, reaching up underneath the mist tent and looking me in the eyes as I coughed and said, "Joey, I'm positive you're going to make it."
Mm.
I wasn't really sure I was going to make it until that moment. And when someone as significant as your mother in a 9-year-old boy's life, right, speaks truth to you like that, you just latch on to it, because it was the only hope I had. So I made it through the night. The next morning, Dr. Dees came through, removed the medication that was in the mist tent with a few choice words to her internist who had called on us during the night. And I recovered, and I just kept getting stronger, stronger, stronger. And my mom's words rang in my ear, "Joey, I'm positive you're going to make it." I didn't try to mow lawns when I got back home, but I did come back home and discover in my mailbox a big brown envelope, about 9 by 12, from the Sales Leadership Club. Now, this was 100 years ago. It was a big deal back then to get an inscribed Christmas card. That is, your name, your family's name was printed inside the Christmas card. Now it's a big deal if you get one that's handwritten, because everybody's sending you something, right? It's already inscribed. So I said, well, hey, I can't mow lawns, but I can do this. So I began going door to door in August in Eastern North Carolina, 100 degrees, 100% humidity, showing people pictures of Christmas cards. Well, the actual Christmas cards inside my handy dandy catalog. See, I can show them to you now. It's like a 9-year-old Vanna White, I guess. And there was Frosty and Rudolph and all the other Christmas type characters on these Christmas cards. And I was asking people how many boxes they wanted to buy. And so I just kept doing that, everybody that I ran into, and I got a telescope. Now, understand, when I was a 9-year-old boy, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, July 20, 1969. That's why I wanted a telescope, at least, because I wanted to see if I could see Neil Armstrong.
See the landing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I got a cassette recorder, which was nouveau technology then. And then the coup de grace was a 3-speed bike, which was the most speeds you could buy back then. And so I learned then that positive mindset makes all the difference in the world and allows you to recover from any adversity, even those that threaten death. And you can move forward to live into your best life and to even do a little work on purpose.
Wow. And you got that at 9. Some of us have to wait until we're, 39, 49, 59, 69 to get that message, so you got a kind of a leg up on us, Dr. Joy.
Well, when you're told that you might not make it through the night, at least it tends to rivet your attention on the things that are really,
I suppose so.
Capture those lessons.
I suppose so. Well, I can certainly see, and that's one of the things I love about when I'm working with leaders inside organizations and really helping them understand their own individual purpose and how it aligns with that of the organization. A lot of people do have these kinds of stories, but they haven't really done, though, the work of really helping themselves to understand why they're important and how they inform their sense of self, their identity, and who they are, and perhaps even their purpose. So I think it's beautiful that fast forward just a couple of years, that you have now threaded that into everything that you do. And, everything, this whole notion of work positive. And you and I both know, I mean, that whole, that's just not so for so many people. So being obsessed with work positive, especially in a world that's constantly complaining about work, got to be an interesting place to be for you.
It is a very interesting place, and one that defies truth, I think. Because the reality is, if you're healthy enough physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually to work, that in itself is like a gimme. That's a huge opportunity for you each and every day. So it is a bit of a mystery that people would spend 70% of their waking hours doing something they're miserable at. Man, life is way too short to endure that kind of misery every day. And yet you and I both see it day after day after day.
Yeah, I'm going to say two things to that. So one, I want to quote from your book, the Work Positive in a Negative World book. You write in that book that 67 to 75% of the American workers surveyed rate themselves as either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied at work. It's a huge number. It's
Big
an
number.
enormous number.
Yeah.
Why do you suppose they are willing to do that? Why are they showing up every day? And
The short answer is they box themselves in a financial corner, and therefore have to work. I owe, so off to work I go. We saw, of course, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but we saw during the Great Resignation that people literally discovered, I can leave this job. We're not talking career calling here, at least. We're talking job, and it's disposable. So I can leave this and go to another company and hope that the culture in that company is better, or that I'll magically fall into a place where I fit wonderfully. It just doesn't happen by chance. It takes a high level of self-awareness, some emotional intelligence, the right questions, but it is doable, right? And you and I both have seen it. We know we develop leaders who create that kind of culture that can attract top talent, that can reduce team turnover, and actually grow people and profits. So why do we do it? I guess the short answer is financial, but the other answer, literally, I think, is because we're just kicking the can down the road that work is miserable. And the more you suffer, the more you brag about how many hours you work in a week, the more you talk about how many frequent flyer miles you have, how much you're away from your family. It was almost a badge of honor for my generation as a baby boomer. Now, fortunately, the millennials and then certainly Gen Z have figured out that my generation had the highest divorce rate of any previous generation, highest addiction rates, alcohol, pills, whatever you want to name, of any. And we have more kids in therapy. Not there's anything wrong being in therapy, please. But the percentage of our children in therapy was higher than any previous generation. So they saw what a trash heap we'd made of life by just selling our souls to the company store. And they're insisting, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Whereas my generation, if I had to put on my calendar for my boss to see, therapist, I'm going to see Dr. Cortez at 3:00. No, I would never do that. However, Gen Z puts it on there and it's like, okay, I'll be gone for an hour. I'm going to see my therapist. So kudos to them for understanding how to create a healthier lifestyle for themselves and insisting that they do that.
I love what you have surfaced here, Dr. Joey, that I just kind of want to piggyback off. I have so many people oftentimes really complain vehemently about the generation that comes after them, and I have a different perspective about that. My perspective is each generation makes us better as a human race. So
Absolutely.
I think your generation really helped us embrace the idea of a work ethic of, let's commit to something, let's be in it for the long haul. And, there's a payoff for that, lots of payoffs. There are lots of good payoffs that happen for that in addition to what you put forth. I am the very end of the Gen X generation, and we questioned some things, and we didn't put all of our faith in that whole basket. And we kind of were looking for ways to be able to optimize our own, our personal fulfillment as well, which I think was a nice, good trade-off for what you did. And then Gen Y or millennials come along and they're like, hang on a second, you guys, do you know you don't really have to work 60, 80 hours a week? That is nonsense. That's craziness. You don't need to do that. So they pushed back on that and we went, huh? We don't? Yeah, you're right. And then Gen Z comes along and they're like, listen, guys, if this isn't meaningful and it's not attached to some kind of a purpose, I'm out.
Yeah,
And
and
I
if I
really
don't belong in that culture, I'm gone.
Right. And so I just feel like every generation has really helped steward our consciousness and really our fullness as a human being. So I have
Mm.
great hope for Gen Y and Gen Z. And of course,
Oh,
that's
me
part of
too.
what I think both you and I are doing, is helping to create cultures that make them want to belong and give their best and will make them feel like they can.
Absolutely. And actually, to help companies structure a culture in which belonging and becoming are de facto.
Right. Yes. Well, on that note, let's let our listeners and viewers take our first break as they start to digest some of the things that we've talked about here. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Joy Faucette, who transforms companies from a negative Kevin culture to a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. He's the culture architect of the Work Positive Framework, certified executive coach, podcast host, and author. We've been talking a bit about his remarkable story that set him on his journey toward work positive. After the break, we're going to get into some of the main aspects of his book and then talk about some of the areas that really call him around culture. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Like Joey, I am also dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work, and they're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. So I keep researching and writing my books. My last one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And what it's about is I'm trying to help you understand, leaders and business owners, the lay of today's workforce land. What do they want and need from you in order to give their best? So I lay that out in the first half. The second half gives you 22 best practices to build into your culture to give them what they want. You can learn more about it at my personal website, elisecortez.com, or just pick it up on Amazon. If you are just now joining me, my guest is Dr. Joy Faucette. He is the author of Work Positive in a Negative World, Team Edition. So before we get into just some of the kind of the structure of your book, I really like how you just lay out the 5 core practices. Just curious, I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but why do you think so many people are mired in such negative thinking? Set aside the idea that they're having, the miserable experience at work. Why are we clinging to negative thinking?
Because it's familiar.
Okay.
And we love familiar thoughts. We we
Mm-hmm,
will
mm-hmm.
cling to the familiar even when it's miserable. It's not that the old dog can't learn new tricks. It's that the old dog has to unlearn the previous tricks.
Yep.
So that familiarity just cultivates it. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not even the son of a neuroscientist, nor have I played one on TV, just saying. But I have studied the brain a bit, and about the third time a fear or something similar to that circles your brain through your amygdala, your brain can no longer distinguish between the falsehood of that fear, the fact that that fear has yet to happen, and a reality that has occurred.
Hmm.
And so that fear masquerades as reality. It becomes your reality. And so you nurture it and nourish it and are convinced that it's true. I refer to that as not falling down the rabbit hole with Elise, but with Alice, right? And so you just go deeper and deeper down into that hole, and you convince yourself that this fear is now your reality. Whereas it takes a little bit more work to accept something that's unfamiliar. And it doesn't fit in a file folder in my brain. I've got to find a new file folder in my brain for it to fit in, or create one. And so that takes a little bit of work. I don't know whether our brains are super efficient or lazy, but the outcome's the same. I welcome familiar thoughts when I meet you, when I see you, when I'm in a situation. I immediately look for familiar points of reference. If it fits, that's great. If it doesn't, I'm pushing it back. And I'm just not going to live there. So we become mired down in that negativity, and mired is the correct word because it's familiar. Then we choose context that reinforce that
Mm-hmm.
negativity.
Mm-hmm.
We could spend the rest of the show talking about push media and its effect. They're in business to monetize negativity, right? And their mantra is if it bleeds, it leads. And so every newscast starts off with the absolute worst thing that could happen that day. And if it wasn't in your community, at least it's somewhere in another community. So they're going to import it, bring it right into your community as if it happened in yours. So don't despair if nobody got murdered in your community. Somebody did in another community. We're going to bring that right to your dining room table and help get heartburn and indigestion. And we willingly turn this on. We start our days with it. And don't tell me it's just background noise. It is marinating your brain in negativity so that by the time you get, let's say, whether you're walking downstairs to your remote office or you're going to an office building, your brain is so marinated in that negativity, productivity, engagement, all the things that you and I help companies establish. It's like a fortress mentality. You got to break through the negativity first. And that's a lot of heavy lifting to start your workday.
That was a fantastic answer, and I didn't even expect most of that. Thank you, Dr. Joey. That was worth the price of admission right there. Okay, now we got to
listen to podcasts, right?
Right. Well, I learn all kinds of amazing things on podcasts, and not just my own. So we have to. I'm going to peel back one word that you used in that, and before I do, let me just kind of set this up.
Okay.
I have a fantastic spiritual and leadership guru. He is Dr. Lance Secretan. He's written, I don't know, 26, 28 books or whatever. One of the latest is Reawakening the Human Spirit, which I'm reading because I'm also going through his program. I am always learning myself, always looking to learn so I can be of higher service to my clients. Just before I got on with you, I was reading a bit from one of his chapters in which he also talks about the importance, the criticality of unlearning. So let's talk about this. What does unlearning entail? How do we actually achieve unlearning?
We so often assume because we've had an experience that experience is formative. It is it's determinative and formative. In other words, my identity is wrapped up in that experience. When actually we as conscious human beings, right, can choose to interpret an experience in any manner that we choose. So Dr. Peel in 1952 wrote this little book called The Power of Positive Thinking.
He
And
did.
in it, he says, within every adversity lies the seeds of opportunity. So the choice is ours. Your brain is like a muscle. You can develop muscle memory with your brain. So do I choose to focus on the adversity, the storm, the circumstances that surround me that make me feel like I'm out of control, that I have no control, that I'm a victim? Or do I choose to search for the opportunity within that? And in a work environment, competitive advantage is everything. So having persons who have that positive mindset and are digging for the opportunities then becomes your competitive advantage economically, as well as attracting top talent, reducing team turnover. So you want to unlearn ways. Let me typify it very quickly. Growth versus fixed mindset, right? Carol
Right.
Dweck. It's that kind of thing. I want to grow through these experiences, or am I going to entrench and continue to see myself in a victimology? Because you see what you look for.
Right.
And since I see what I look for, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. If I can, as I put on a new set of lenses, a new filter, then I can find the opportunities within the seeds of opportunity within the adversity.
Oh, I love that, Dr. Joey. Thank you. I can say for me, how I also think about that just in my own world, I guess most of us have a default response. If something
We
happens and
do.
our default is this is what we do. And I think
Default Zoom.
part of the way that I have approached unlearning for myself is examining what is my default whenever I possibly can. I have to sort of intervene in that to do that. And
Sure.
then just looking for a different way that I can respond that maybe is different, or maybe it's, I think it might produce a higher result or something. And so decoupling from that automatic response, I feel like is part of
Mhm.
unlearning.
Oh, definitely decoupling from it. Now, that's hard work because it's at such a deep level for most of us. It's at a subconscious, dare I say, spiritual level for us, even that it just becomes a part of our self-identity. So
Right.
there is something, without getting too existential here, there is something about putting yourself up for grabs, being transparent with someone else, authentic with someone else, listening to yourself, and just gaining that self-awareness. One of the ways we do that in companies is through a 360 review, and we use a narrative as opposed to a survey monkey process. Nothing wrong with survey monkey. No monkeys were damaged in the recording of this podcast.
Indeed. Right. Good.
Yeah, right. But I work with the client to discover who are the 5 to 7 people whose opinions you value. I work with the client to determine those 5 to 7 questions that we're going to ask them. So you've got buy-in automatically from people that you value. And sure, I give some categories, classifications. We want somebody that reports to you, somebody you report to, those kinds of things. But we've got buy-in. There's an openness to listening to that. Are you vulnerable? Yes. Is it authentic? Yes. Is it personal? Of course, but not something to be taken personally, because we want to be on that growth trajectory, which allows us to uncouple from certain patterns of behaviors that we become aware of as the mirror is held up. And then we grow through that. Now, it takes a very, very supportive work environment and an investment in the leadership development of people in order for that to happen.
Mm. I love this, Dr. Joey. You can go existential as far as you want. That I'm down with that. So we tend to venture on
Thank
this podcast like that. So that works for me.
Thank
Um,
you. Well, purpose is wrapped up in self-identity and who we see ourselves as, right?
and definitely the existential piece, big time.
Hmm.
So where I want to go next, because I want to set it up for the rest of our interaction and dialogue here, is for listeners and viewers who haven't actually picked up your book and read it. I want to just showcase that your book centers around 5 core practices. One is perceive, conceive, believe, achieve, receive. And so that's beautiful. I love that whole way of being able to categorize something. So could you just sort of speak to why those are such core practices for you in creating a positive culture? And then as we go on, I want to just let us talk about the things that relative to culture that are really most important and calling on you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Those 5 core practices rhyme. So when I'm standing on a platform in front of 1,200 people, my brain doesn't sit down. So I'm
Right? It
Well,
works. Yes.
well, it does. Well, more to the point, it makes it easy for people to remember. I discovered these 5 core practices when the Great Recession was going on. And during the Great Recession, my wife looked at me one day and said, "Honey, aren't you supposed to be traveling?"
I
It
remember
wasn't
that
that
from
she
your
didn't want
book.
me
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's glad to have me, but she knew I rode a cash cow every time I went out of town. So I told her the cash cow had been slaughtered. So there was no training and development money out there. And so that was my wake up call. I had to decouple from, oh, woe is me. What am I going to do? There's a great recession too. How can I find the seeds of opportunity in this adversity? So I began doing research into a period of economic history, not just in our country, but around the world, that I heard my grandparents talking about. And that was the Great Depression,
Right.
back when depression was an economic rather than simply a medical term. And I said, somebody to,
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at that, but it was funny.
well, that's okay. I said somebody must have started a company or done something significant economically in and around the Great Depression. Who are they? And more to the point, what were they doing?
Yeah. Mm.
And how can I do what they were doing? So I began my research and I discovered some amazing people. And that's where these 5 core practices came from. So I like to say that the work positive culture starts and stops in your head. And it goes back to that positive mindset we were talking about a moment ago. It goes back to fixed versus growth mindsets. You literally see what you look for. And this is the perceive core practice. And I chose the word perceive intentionally because your reality is what you perceive it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you manifest that reality that you perceive. So since you see what you look for, you want to focus on the positive and filter out the negative. Now, this is not some Jedi ninja mind trick or something, because bad things do happen to good people, right? There is something negative that goes on. Economic conditions like the Great Recession happen, and we choose how to respond to those, or we choose to react to them. So since you see what you look for, you want to focus on the positive and filter out the negative. There are lots of tactics and techniques we teach, like the gratitude diary, like the morning routine, start your morning, start your day the work positive way. There's just all kinds of things that support that. So what we're after here is a company culture that recognizes the power of the mind and empowers teams and employees, but particularly leaders, to inspire
Mm-hmm. Yes.
everyone to look for, to hold up. Here's something positive someone did this week. Here's something great that happened in the company. And it's that inspiration that generates hope. And that's what people are looking for, especially we're back to Generation S, especially Gen Z, begging for hope. And so they're provided that hope. It helps them focus on the positive and to filter out the negative. So you can, yes, this happened, and yes, this happened, but, and you're constantly holding up those seeds of opportunity. Now, it's not some Pollyanna, namby-pamby, squishy kind of trick. It's literally, and you have to dig harder some days than others, it's literally focusing on the positive, and that sets your mind in a positive way for the perceive core practice. And what happens is that, let's say you start vibrating on that positive wavelength, right? You're training your brain to focus on the positive and filter out the negative. Not everyone around you is going to be doing that. Amazing, isn't it? And you're suddenly going to see these people in a different light. And this is where the conceive core practice comes in.
Mm-hmm.
The relationships, whether it's within teams or with clients or customers, vendors and suppliers, between leader or boss and employees, frontline people, all of these things really matter a lot. And conceive is all about focusing on the positive people. You're not necessarily putting yourself in an echo chamber as such. There's a huge amount of realism in this. It's just, again, you're choosing your reality. Jim Rohn, my favorite business philosopher, was fond of saying that you're the average of the 5 persons with whom you spend the most time.
Completely agree.
The Framingham Heart Study, proved time after time after time that if you hang out with people with certain habits, you adopt those habits as your own. Eating was one of the first ones that they saw, because that affects cholesterol, which affects heart disease. We become like the persons with whom we associate the most. I call negative people. So the key here is to deal with negative people without becoming one yourself, because inevitably there's going to be a disgruntled customer or client, somebody on the team who doesn't quite get it. And so I've created a euphemism of Eeyore vampires for these negative people. ER, because I simply love the Winnie the Pooh series, and because I really see it as a team meeting when Pooh and Piglet and my favorite, T-I-double-G-R, get together, right? And they're planning the perfect play day for Christopher Robin. And then along comes Eeyore, and what does he say? It'll never work, right? So every one of us have been on a team that has someone who says, that'll never work. We tried that back in 1963. Didn't work
Right.
then. It's not
Right.
going to work now.
Right.
Vampires, because if we could just leave Eeyore at work, that would be cool. But you can't, because when you go home and you're with the people that you love and you're trying to do the things that you love with the people you love, guess who's in the back of your mind sucking time and energy and attention away from those people? It's that Eeyore vampire. So Eeyore morphs into a vampire when the sun goes down. So it's highly, highly critical that you choose your top 5 to be persons who are perceiving so that you can conceive at work.
Yep. Yes. Oh my gosh, Dr. Joy, that was so beautiful. I love you and I. We can complete each other's sentences, but we won't do that. We'll remain independent. But let's let our listeners and viewers
Give us a third
marinate.
podcast and we can do it, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be really fun.
I do
Let's
too.
let them marinate in what you just shared there. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Joy Faucette, who transforms companies from a negative Kevin culture to a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. He is the culture architect of the Work Positive Framework, certified executive coach, podcast host, and author. We've been talking a bit about mindset, negative versus positive, and his core practices. After the break, we're going to just devote that time period to talking about some ways that we can build a positive culture. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break about my latest book coming out, The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I put a 3-page downloadable assessment on my website for you. So you can download that and then look to the extent to which your company's culture is currently designed to be able to meet the needs of today's workforce. The other thing about that particular document is it will help give you an idea, a roadmap to creating the culture for that is required of today's workforce. So you can find it at gusto-now.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Dr. Joy Faucette. He is the author of Work Positive in a Negative World, Team Edition. So let's have a little fun here, Dr. Joy. Here, not that we haven't been having fun so far, but I just want to devote this last bit here to letting us kind of riff and talk about some of your more favorite aspects of creating a positive work culture. Where would you like to start?
Wow. Let's start with the believe core practice, which after perceive and conceive comes in. Believe is like the fulcrum that perceive and conceive, and then on the other side, achieve and receive turn on.
Okay.
Emotional engagement with work is of supreme importance. I think, back into our existential journeys, I think existentially it's of supreme importance for us. So it's this alignment of individual purpose with company purpose, with individual passion, with company mission. And so when that alignment occurs, at least it's just simply magical. It is unbelievable. The company becomes unstoppable. Mm-hmm. Now, we measure for engagement so often, right? And so when we pay attention to my emotional connection with my work, right here in the gut, right? It's showtime. I mean, you are off to the races now. It's like the lights are on. The NBA announcer has welcomed you to the finals. It's time to take a shot. And that's the real jazz for me, because when that happens, then families are happier, right? Communities become happier. I want to give back into my community, which is a receive core practice. I'm achieving greater results, which means I'm more productive than I ever have been before. So that believe core practice is the real point of where the fulcrum is for me. That's the jazz, because that's when the whole thing gets energized. And so innovation, creativity, the kinds of things that are true competitive advantages in company cultures happen. That's when you see your operating income go up by 19%, your revenue growth year over year up to 28%. That gets the CFO's attention when you start using those numbers, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Yeah, that emotional connection piece is so, so important. I just, it breaks my heart. I remember one of the stories I like to tell is I belong to a gym, which I don't belong to anymore, but I come in on Monday at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm saying, "Hey, Stephen, good morning. How's it going?" And without exception, his response was always, "Is it Friday yet?" And,
Wow.
and my thinking is, we have one precious life and we do not know when the exit ramp is coming. And if we are literally, waiting for just the weekend to come so we can begin our lives, it's such a waste of a precious life. So
Total
yes, the
waste.
emotional connection is so, so, so important. So I
Mm.
love that. Talk to me more about other practices that you especially are fired up about that you really like to help companies infuse in their culture.
Mm. By the way, both of us enjoy helping create company cultures where people
Mhm.
look forward to Monday as much as Friday.
Absolutely right.
Right, right. And the people they work with. And so I guess the jazz for me is one that I mentioned just a moment ago, and that is people will surprise themselves by the
Mhm.
results they're able to achieve. And I love watching that transformation.
Me too.
It's like a mustard seed kind of experience. You got a dude like that asking, "Is it Friday yet?" Right? Just watching him discover something within
Yeah.
himself, and the
Mhm.
company is nurturing and supporting that growth. And I know this sounds squishy. I know it sounds woo-woo, but it is for real because that purpose and passion individually is getting connected with the company purpose and passion, right? Or purpose and mission. And when that happens, you literally need to stand back because you're going to launch and the trajectory is going to be straight up and then the company's going to experience hockey stick growth and the world becomes a better place because families
Yes.
are enhanced, communities are enhanced, and we have I don't want to go too deep into this, but I'll just say this and run. We have allowed the negativity to rule long enough.
Yes.
And the great joy de vivre that we can all experience is in what I'm calling, much like your great revitalization, I'm calling the great redefinition of work,
Yep.
to where that purpose and passion can be kindled, fanned into a flame, and amazingly just create light and warmth in
Mm.
every single community. And it can happen. We just have to be more intentional about it.
That's the world I want to live in, Dr. Joy, and help co-create. So you're right. We are both of us working on similar oars, each of us rowing the boat here, if you will. But
Mhm.
and one of the things I always like to say to that end in that regard is I really firmly believe I was raised by farmers who believed that work was a way of life. It wasn't something you had to do. It was the way that you lived.
Mm,
And
mm.
so for me, I'm out to really help more people to experience work as their magical, mystical playground, where they can realize their potential, where they do things they never believed they
Mhm,
thought were possible
mhm,
for themselves,
mhm.
and they're even dazzled by their own accomplishments and their own contributions,
Their own
uh,
brilliance.
their own brilliance, and but that gets catalyzed by the world of work in a way
Yes,
that many other
yes.
aspects of our life can't do, including
Mhm.
even just, beautiful loved ones and relationships.
Oh,
Work is such a catalyzing agent.
mm.
Now it can be a terribly negative catalyzing agent, but it can also be so incredibly such a growth catalyst. And of course, that is what I think both you and I are really glomming onto and wanting to champion.
Oh, we are, Elise. Both you and I love our families. I love hearing you talk about your daughter. You tolerate all the stories about my granddaughter, and I appreciate it. Not that I tell them all the time. By the way, I have 5,392 pictures since we last spoke. If you'd like to see them.
But who's
Um,
counting?
so, little girl. That's what we'll call my granddaughter. Little girl turned 4 a month or so ago, and just immediately prior to the run up on our birthday, we were having a conversation, and she loves playing with pops, and so we were playing together. And then I went, "Oh, I have a meeting to go to, and I need to spend a few minutes getting ready for it. Pops has to go to work. Let me kiss you. And so we hugged and kissed, and in her embrace, she looks me in the eye and says, "Why do you go to work?"
Mm.
Now, in that moment, there was this pregnant pause, right? Because I knew what I was about to say was really important, because I was going to be creating a mental typology for
Yes,
her regarding work.
that's right.
I looked at her and I said, "Pops loves helping people. That's why I work."
Home run, Dr. Joey.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. But it was a studied response, right? So recently, she was going to go to the beach with her mom and dad, our daughter and son-in-law. And we were walking down to feed one of our horses, and we were walking hand in hand because she loves holding hands. And I said, "Little girl, you're going to be gone 4 whole days. I'm going to miss you. What am I going to do?"
I
So
know.
we're walking along, and she says, "Well, Pops, you can play with my toys if you want to." Now, understand, for her, play is her work.
Right.
That's what she does. She develops mentally, physically, emotionally by playing. She heard what I said about helping others through work, and she was helping me by offering
Oh.
me her work environment. I could play with
Mhm.
her toys if I wanted to. So,
Mhm.
when she got back and she jumped up in my arms, you know what I told her? "Thanks for letting me play with your toys. I had fun."
That's so beautiful. And by the way, listeners and viewers, one of the things that makes Dr. Joey really outstanding as an author and as a teacher is his whole book is really he teaches through story. So the whole entire book is beautiful stories about his life and his family and his connection, and that's how he illustrates his points. So it's an incredibly relatable work. So just have to give a shout out for that, Dr. Joey. It is really very distinguishing how you do that.
Thanks. Well, I know that most people don't read past the 3rd chapter of a book, because that's what
Yeah,
publishers
I
tell
know.
us.
It's
Right?
just better not to hear that after we've worked hard to
I
don't tell me
know.
that right now. I'm working on
I
another one.
know.
Don't tell
Yeah,
me.
really. I'm
Uh,
working on another one too, but it's like telling a mother her newborn is ugly, right?
yeah, or just might as well stop growing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we're not gonna
we're
do that. But
we're we're
I'm determined to write a book, that people would read past the 3rd chapter. And stories engage us, because I see my story, you know, in your stories, and you see
Mhm,
your story in my
mhm.
stories,
Well,
and
and they're
so
memorable that way too. They're sticky. So,
yeah, they really
um,
are. So
well,
it's just
we've
a front porch experience, that's all.
yeah, we've already amazed. We got to the end of the show already, Doctor. It goes by so fast. You know that this show is
Thank
listened to by people around the world, and what they're out to do, either individually, is they want to increase their enjoyment and fulfillment within their work, and they want to also be part of helping create a workplace that they're proud of, that they can
you.
grow into their heart potential and give their best. What would you like to leave them with today?
Oh, wow. Could I give you a gift for listening? That would do me a world of good.
Sure, you bet.
The Receive Core
About 30
practice.
seconds, if you would. Yeah.
All right. We learned to say thank you to others. So thank you for listening today. Go to workpositive.today, and there's a free course called Something to Talk About. It's a mini course. Help yourself to it, enjoy it, talk about something unfamiliar at work, and that is how much you love your work.
That is a beautiful way to finish giving a gift, Dr. Joy. Thank you. I really enjoy being connected to you. We've now been connected for a bit, and I love your work, reading your work, talking with you about it. That we each of us have important work to do. So thank you for sharing your wisdom, your heart, your grace on working on purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be here. Thank you so much.
So welcome. Listeners and viewers, you are going to want to learn more about this remarkable man, Dr. Joey Faucette, the work that he does transforming companies from a negative Kevin culture to a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits, his books and podcasts. So you should go ahead and head on over to that site he mentioned. It's workpositive.today. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Dr. Raj Sisodia talking about his latest book, which is number 16. It's called Awaken, The Path to Purpose, Inner Peace and Healing. It was an incredible honor to have him back on and have him share so deeply and openly and vulnerably about his life and all he went through to become who he is today. It was really incredible. I dare say you will laugh, you will cry, and you will be inspired by the interview and his book. Next week, we'll be on the air with Darren Tolley talking about his book, Live Your Possible, Ignite Your Happy, Authentic Self, and Live a Fulfilling Life Rooted in Joy, Inclusion, Love, and Possibilities. Sounds pretty good, yeah? See you there. And remember that work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's keep working and looking for ways to work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.